Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, episode 5 is here, and I brought you a doozy of a guest. She is one of the funniest comedians in Columbus. She will claim otherwise, but I'm telling you right now that she is. She's won awards saying as much, so I know it's accurate. She'll disagree, but I do have Leslie Battle on the show for you today.
Hi, everybody. How about if I don't disagree, but I will say that time is transitive. And so for a moment in time at a contest, I was definitely, the person who seemed to get the best crowd reaction. But it's perishable.
Tell me about that moment, though. Take me back to that moment. You're there. Explain this to me. How many comics are there? What's the setup? Tell me what's in your head. What's the crowd like? What's you winning like? Put me in the moment. Put us in the moment.
So let's see. This was, what year was it? 2014, maybe? So when I started comedy, it was after my second divorce. And I had just dismal self-esteem. I got dragged through the mud in court. I felt awful about myself. And I needed something to build my ego that wasn't living through my kids vicariously. And it ended up being comedy. I considered myself kind of a ringer because public speaking has always been a thing that I've never had a problem with. And I was one of those people that would make people laugh in conversation. I was like, I really would have preferred to do community theater, but I had my kids week on, week off, and that was my priority. So anything that was going to take me away from my kids' time was not, an option. So I started doing comedy and had done the contest a couple of times. And the first year that I did it, I'd only been doing comedy, like I started in July, and so the contest started like in October. And I would give myself goals that I thought were unrealistic so that I could knock myself back into reality. So I was telling myself, I really can't be doing the starving artist thing. This is just a phase. What are you doing? You're a middle-aged woman. What's wrong? Blah, blah, blah. And went to the finals my first time trying. And I was just kind of like, okay, well, people like me. That's good. I mean, this is what I was going for. So honestly, the night of the contest, because I had been in the finals a couple of times before, I had already told myself there was no way that I was going to win. I was just excited to be top 3. And so I'm sitting there on stage with the other top 3. And I'm actively actually telling myself, don't be a bitch when they don't call your name. Like, be gracious to the winner, congratulate them, blah, blah, blah. And I was so focused on telling myself that they called my name and I literally didn't hear it. Like, the person's like 3 feet away from me and I literally didn't hear it because I'm sitting here telling myself, don't be that person. And so my friend like nudged me like, you won, like, hello, and I was just like, wait, what? I wasn't expecting it. I was really happy, obviously, but after so long of telling myself that these things were just subjective because I hadn't won before, then winning, like, I kind of like missed the moment a little bit because I was sitting there telling myself, well, you're not gonna win it, so what are you doing?
You didn't keep your eye on the prize.
Huh?
You didn't keep your eye on the prize.
Well, and the thing is, the wins are great, but the wins aren't paid. So for me, the prize was making my reputation and my resume up to the point that me getting paid gigs to potentially make a living from it. Because at first I was just like, I'm gonna just tell jokes, and then people started wanting to pay me to tell jokes, and I was kind of like, well, yeah, I can do that too, it wasn't, I really was in it from the beginning just to like build up my ego and have a good outlet for myself and to meet people too, And then it ended up turning into something that for, a few years was kind of my mission, because it was the only thing that I felt like I was good at.
So that win did set you up then to start making money doing comedy?
Well, I was already getting some minimal paid gigs. The thing is, there's not like a linear track for anybody to follow. And I really am kind of concerned for people that are wanting to start now, just because the landscape is so markedly different. But
why is that? Expound on that. So if somebody wanted to start right now, let's say I want to get into stand-up comedy, what has changed?
I mean, just the venues for the open mics are, mostly bars and stuff. Mm-hmm. And not all of them are open anymore. Not all of them are doing open mics because of, social distancing and everything. And so there are people that are doing live shows, but it's not going to be the kind of crowd that you're going to, I really kind of feel like, and I haven't done any live shows since isolation started. Let me point that out. So I may be completely wrong, but I feel like there's a certain kind of apprehension now, because there are people who are concerned about their safety. And there have been a couple of incidents with like D.L. Hughley ended up testing positive after having done some live shows. And a lot of people are like, ugh, now, is he going to be okay? Probably, yeah. But the whole idea of trying to keep the mic sanitized or have different mics between comics and who's in the crowd, and there's just a lot of different things, and that's a national name that's paid. So the idea of getting a crowd to come out to an open mic, for people to get that experience and learn how to read the crowd and figure out which words hit as jokes versus those that don't, it's really different. And doing virtual shows is totally different experience.
You feel something's lost with a virtual show?
Yes. For me as a performer, I can still trudge my way through it without the feedback. But I would say that for someone who is just starting, who doesn't know the difference between a joke hitting and bombing, to not have that feedback from a crowd, it's going to be a lot more difficult. And the thing with the mics too is that there's like the comics hang, and you'll have the comics that are a little more experienced, like talking to the younger folks if they're open to the feedback. I mean, some people come into it and they're just like, look, I've already reinvented the wheel and I'm going to say the N-word and do blackface and it's just what I'm doing. Okay.
You had that conversation? You've had someone come up to you and let you know, hey, I do offensive stuff, so I'm giving you a heads up?
Oh, no. Those types typically don't do that. They don't care. That's not.
Oh, they just do it. They won't even give you the courtesy.
Right. But I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people think that that's what mics are for. Mm-hmm. And, you got these edgelords who are just like, oh, well, I can do this thing where I'm hinting at rape and it's not going to be that bad because I'm just hinting at it. And it's just kind of like, no, dude, that's not at all. You're not. And it's funny because when I first started, I'm going to the mics and all these dudes are talking about is their penises and having sex with fat women. And I'm just kind of like, well, I guess that's what everybody wants to hear because this is all I'm hearing at the mics. And once I started, getting more solid with what I was talking about, because I'm a divorced woman, I talk about being in the military, I talk about parenting my kids, I talk about, being a divorcee trying to date and all this kind of stuff. And there were people in the audience who identified with that. When you go to the more paying gigs, the mics are usually going to be, young people that are there to cheer on their buddy or whatever, may or might not even listen to their set. And they just want the cheap drinks, So it's a different audience for a live show between a mic and a book show. But yeah, the folks that are, going into it because they think that they've figured out the latest way to say the most repulsive of things, no, they just let it fly, and then act all like weird when you're just like, yeah, that wasn't cool.
So,
Or sometimes they don't get any feedback.
so you mentioned that you were in the military. You were in the military for a long time.
Yeah, most of your life.
We discussed earlier, actually, around the same time it coincided, the start of your military life and the start of my actual life.
When's your birthday?
June 12th.
Yeah, you were 2 months old.
I was 2 months old. Nice.
You were just shy of 2 months old. I went to basic training August 10th.
Nice. Well, my question was, it's clear you're very vocal about social justice.
Yes.
So was it difficult for you to be so outspoken?
I wasn't.
So you weren't.
I was very naive. I mean, if you're talking about Leslie from 30 years ago, understand I grew up in East Texas. And so I didn't know what I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I knew there was a difference between white people and black people, but I held on to the whole, like, everybody's got the same opportunities thing. And even after I joined the military, when you're young, you're young, and I didn't date much in high school, so I didn't have a lot of sexual experience. And I'm only now realizing some of the things that I didn't know at that stage in the game. So if my public school education had told me more about Tulsa, had told me more about the 13th Amendment, had told me more about Jim Crow, then I'm pretty sure that my mindset would have been different. But at that point in time, I was literally oblivious to those things. Like, I had no idea. Like, I just found out about tussle like 2-3 years ago. And
was there a point in your military service where, just based on experience, you started being less naive and things started to click more?
Well, I mean,
or is it difficult because it's so, I can't imagine being in there, but is it insulated to some degree?
There is some insulation, and I think that and heaven knows I am not one of those flag waving, want to shut everybody up kind of people, first of all. But it's like, I forget who I was talking to. I kind of think it was you. I don't remember. But what people don't realize is that any uniformed organization, right? They get their recruits from society. And society has in it people with psychopathic behaviors, people who are predatory, that's just part of society. And so to me, the military is kind of like a cross section of that society. And that's, we do have some diversity, and we do have, some opportunities that may not be as rapid, I guess, in the civilian world, but it doesn't mean that the environment is necessarily more welcoming for minorities than the rest of society. Because you still had to deal with rednecks, you still had to deal with sexists, you still had to deal with that. And so the only thing that I think is really significant about the military experience is when you go through basic training, there's so much emphasis on being part of the team. And once you've been in a unit, especially a unit that's deployed, you kind of do have this kind of family thing. And yeah, you got that one cousin Jethro that don't nobody talk to. Okay, we got it. That dude is still there. But those experiences and that bonding does happen. But just like in a genetic family, if somebody on some bullshit, you absolutely gonna tell them they on some bullshit unless they outrank you. So the senior people are more like the parents, and then the people that are peers, we're more like the siblings or cousins. But I mean, there's still elements
Mm-hmm.
that can make things unpleasant for some if it goes unchecked. And unfortunately, that just seems to be the tendency, is when there are certain people in power that some things just get kind of overlooked and swept under the rug, and decisions get made that really don't seem just, but they still make the decision, and hey, I'm in charge, so that's my decision.
So we had Sarah Storer on the show last week, and she mentioned, I brought up, predators in comedy spaces and theaters, etc. And she made a point that predators don't just exist in those spaces; they exist everywhere. And now you're telling us very similar sentiment, and you're speaking about completely different part of life. You're talking about the military. So how do you, I guess, how do you avoid, is enough being done? What can you do to avoid these predatory people? And because the problem I run across is these predatory people are really good on preying on your best intentions. So you'll interact with people with best intentions, and they can convince you, from my experience, that they're the last thing from a predator or a sociopath or someone that you would associate with, and they convince you otherwise, which is why a lot of people feel so deceived or so heartbroken when that person's finally exposed, because a lot of times they didn't even see it coming.
Well, this is a very complicated, to me, issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because first of all, I mean, this goes back to the patriarchy and, race versus status. I mean, there's so much that feeds into whether or not a predator can get away with their behavior. To me, and I mean, don't get it twisted, because Leslie's dealt with her share of predators, but I would say my experience is, when we're talking about a person of that type, they don't like getting their hands dirty. They want somebody that they can influence and coerce verbally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, the extreme ones actually get violent. I'm not saying that violence isn't a thing, but by and large, I was thinking about this today. I mean, that's part of the reason that date rape jobs got so popular, because these people that were using those to drug people, they wouldn't have any resistance, and their victims wouldn't have any memory, so their credibility is like out the window. So they're just like, I can do what I want and there's no consequence. But I believe that was born from this whole idea, with rape culture that we've had, where it's the responsibility of the victim to not get attacked, as opposed to us teaching each other what kind of behaviors are unacceptable, and being willing to accept when somebody says, hey, I need you to back off, instead of to keep pushing. And it's, like I said, it's complicated, because I look at it this way. Like, when Me Too was like high in the conversation priority, right? And there's these men that are just like, well, I don't even know what to say, because it might be taken wrong, blah, 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 blah. And my reality, anyway, is the guy who's even asking that question isn't the predator. The predators are the one who are like, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and you just got to deal with it, because bleh. I mean, there's people that really think and feel that way. And if you have a partner that's on board with that, then more power to you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just, running through the world like a bull in a china shop, and unfortunately what our patriarchal society has done is not had any consequences for the majority of these people. I mean, selective enforcement is a reality. It freaking is. And I think one of the most impossible messages to try to convey to someone as far as trying to be mindful of their surroundings, but you can't stop another human being from doing something to you if they've decided to do it. You can defend yourself to the best of your ability, but at the end of the day, a decision is theirs, it's not yours. But what we do is we say, well, what can I do to reinforce myself so that they won't do it? And the real answer is there's nothing that I could do. Like, there's the whole big thing about, people are trying to get away from it, but like sexualizing how a person dresses. Because, well, you wouldn't dress like that if you weren't looking for attention, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't give you a right to touch that person. And on the same token,
a person may be looking to be touched, but not by you.
Well, no. I mean, that's.
I'm saying, even if they were doing it because they do want to be attractive, that doesn't mean anyone can go up and have their way. Is what I mean. Like somebody dresses up to go out,
right?
Because they do want to court. That's not an open invitation for anyone that wants to go have at it.
Right. And that's the thing, is so much of this thing, so much of this culture has to do with, in as much as me dressing a certain way is my own conscious decision, you don't get to take away my right to make my decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what ends up happening practically. And I mean, now what you have is, now we got to worry about somebody putting something in our drink, or now we got to wonder about what's going to happen if I end up in a relationship with this person or whatever, and they take things too far. But the other thing though too, the flip side to that, I could wear a muumuu, shapeless, completely covered. I could wear a burqa.
Yeah, for sure.
And if a dude wanted, or a woman for that matter, wanted to have their way with me, that's their decision. And so over the years, this message was reinforced that, well, you as a person want to watch your drink all the time and never be anywhere by yourself and all these other things. But it's like, that's literally like 10% of the cases is stranger rape. Like, the vast majority of the assaults are people that are acquaintances, family members, people that were trusted. And after all of that shaming, and you must have done something to deserve it, then you've got, this 13-year-old girl who was assaulted by her uncle saying, well, it's all my fault, and trying to take responsibility for it because I didn't make myself safe.
I see what you're saying. So when the discussion focuses so much on preventing predators, it kind of puts that onus and pressure on the potential victims.
Instead of us putting more emphasis on being, hey, don't be a predator. Like, if somebody tells you no, then accept it and move on. Or, it's frustrating to me that that's kind of a mentality shift, because we've been talking about these issues for well over a decade. But if you think about it on the grand scale of things, like, we've only been talking about these issues for roughly a decade.
And not even very in depth.
Oh, no. And that's the other thing, is like, then if, somebody is assaulted, are they willing, able, capable of following up on it, for the assailant to have consequences? Because the way that the culture is set up is, even now, even with, the programs that people are trying to adopt, you still have, victims being re-traumatized. And it really kind of segue in, but you're talking about me and talking about social issues. frustrates the absolute crap out of me when I see these memes that are just like, well, if you don't have the police anymore, who's going to protect you? And it's just like, but y'all already don't. Like, there are thousands of rape kits that are not processed right now, but y'all got money for fucking tanks and wooden bullets and mace. Like, don't try to shame me into feeling like you're doing this great service to me when the reason you have a job is because I pay taxes.
Yeah, that's definitely a problematic mindset that I've evolved with time, thankfully, because I've met some, strong women who sat me down and really taught me. And I have a daughter, I have my partner, I have my mother. So it's important to me to have less toxic relationships with women.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the greatest failures of American society is that we don't talk about what a healthy relationship, how that dynamic should approach. And I mean, it's different for everybody, first of all, but I'm talking like it was normal in the 50s and even 60s for a partner to be physically, verbally, emotionally abused, and people just thought that's what marriage was. And so then we have divorce culture, and there's this absolute, like, people are just vengeance minded. Like, that doesn't create more toxicity. And like, I'm the worst. I'm gonna die single. It's fine. I'm making peace with it. But like, this dude was chatting me up, right? And I said, well, what are your goals? What are you wanting to achieve? What are you looking for? And he was like, well, I just want to chill, have a good time. Like, I see us hanging out. I said, okay, what does us hanging out look like? What would we do? What are the things that you enjoy? And he couldn't answer me. And so I said, okay, well, here's a couple of kind of rhetorical questions based on this, because you've already established that you're interested in me romantically, and I'm flattered. But how can I help you reach a goal that you don't even know what that goal is? And then if I don't help you reach the thing that you don't know what it is yet, then how are you not going to be mad at me? But we don't talk about dynamics. Huh?
You've just been through it, so you know what's coming around the corners.
Pretty much. And I will absolutely act like it's a freaking job interview. Like, if I can see enough red flags right off the bat, thank you for your interest, but I can see we're not compatible. I no hard feelings, but we're just gonna let this go at this point. But I mean, I'm probably...
I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier. So you mentioned those rape kits that they're just there, not being processed, which in turn I feel encourages women to not report.
Absolutely.
Because they feel there's no follow-up. But a lot of times I use all of this logic to not question women when they come out with accusations. I'm sure there's a small percentage of women who do make stuff up, but the vast majority don't. And the fact that there's all these rape kits, that means somebody did what they needed to do to report it. They gave the evidence, and it's just not being worked, and no one's following up on it. So they are going to get no justice. They feel they now probably can't talk about it because they probably won't be believed. And I see a lot of men having these conversations where I've been called a feminist and insulted as a feminist. Not that I take it as an insult, but in their head, they were insulting me by calling me a feminist because I said, hey, I'm not going to assume she's lying. I'm not going to automatically take the guy's side. I've had a guy say, hey, I've been accused before and it wasn't true. And it kind of makes me think, like, I'm not shocked that you've been accused before because look how hard you're going on about this right now. And I can't help but to think the two things are connected. I try to be very cognizant, and you're never going to be perfect, but I do my best to be cognizant of not coming across or forcing or being forceful in anything having to do with that or getting...
Well, and then we need to talk about the concept of truth.
Let's talk about it. I like it.
Because not saying that this was the case, but going back to what I said earlier about some people saying, I don't know what's appropriate versus I don't know what isn't.
Mm-hmm.
The culture of boys will be boys that, was so heavily, dismissed, even into the, I mean, and even now, like, once Me Too became a hashtag, there were still people who were just like, well, this is just a trend. This is just, a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it, in their minds, it was never about women coming forward and talking about their trauma, and in some cases compound trauma, because they had encountered multiple predators throughout, their life so far.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the flip side of this. Well, all I did was, got her drunk. What's wrong with that? And so there are people who, on the flip side, are just like, well, I didn't do anything wrong, even though everything that they did was absolutely wrong. I mean, like, yeah, she went to sleep or whatever, but I was in her apartment. Why can't I do what I want? So.
Well, speaking on truth, I mean, if we're going to speak on truth, the fact that alcohol marketing is so heavily tied to sex is real problematic, and most of it, 90% of it, is directly connected to it.
How legally speaking, if you are intoxicated, you are not legally capable of providing consent, and that's for either partner.
But that's how they market it. That's why why they sell it at the bars, which to me, bars and clubs are pretty much mating spaces in general. At least that's why I went, and a lot of young people I knew went. Why I'm no longer interested in that life. But so much of it involves alcohol, people being intoxicated, or even college. The entire college culture is about learning about yourself, and it's so heavily associated with drinking.
Well, believe me, in the military, only in the past, like, again, I'd say 10 years, because I retired 5 years ago. But, dude, that's a nervous laugh. That's not a, I think it's funny laugh. That's it's boggling. But that's the thing, is so much of this is we need to get rid of some traditions. We need to get rid of the tradition of victim blaming. We need to get rid of the tradition of saying she ruined his life by him raping her. We need to put the responsibility where it lies and deliver consequences is needed. Now, a thing that I recently struggled with, or not completely recently, and it's compounded by the brutality that's the basis for the civil unrest that we're seeing now, is where's the line between forgiveness and safety? Because I've had to deal with a couple of situations involving people who were reported predators, and I didn't feel safe.
What environment was this in where you experienced this?
Well, there's been a couple, but I'm referring specifically to like shows. Like one situation was
comedy. You doing comedy now? This isn't the military you're referring to.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Talking about comedy, but it's, on the one hand, you don't want anything bad to happen. But on the other hand, how do you know whether or not that person is still engaging in those behaviors? Now, this one particular individual was continuing to make like social media posts and do and say things that basically blew off the accusations against him. Okay, that's your choice. You own it or don't. But from a business standpoint, there are bookers that don't want to be associated with that kind of reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And so there I was like, okay, this festival is in a whole nother state, but everybody here knows about that person, and they actually moved to a different city because they were no longer welcome in the scene here. And for me, it was
So there were
hearsay
people on
because
the scene trying to keep those people away then. So there were people.
oh yeah, oh yeah.
What?
It's a weird dance though, because like we had this other situation with this dude that he had some multiple accusations against him. He was married. And so his thing was, well, I'm married, I would never do blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, okay, yeah, because we know that no married man ever does anything wrong. But when it came up, there were a lot of people that were, you know, on his side or whatever. And okay, that's fine. Well, he had mistreated me from a professional standpoint, not from like, he didn't physically assault me, but there were some shady things that he did as a booker that were not kosher. And so I had these other comics who were like, well, what happened to you? And when I told them, they were like, oh, I thought you were going to say that he raped you. And I was like, but I never said that. I never insinuated that his inappropriateness toward me was sexual. But I mean, if he did that to you, you'd be pissed off. Oh, well, yeah, but it wasn't sexual though. Oh, okay. Well, my bad. what he did to me wasn't severe enough that, you know, because the discussion right now is about his sexual impropriety, and you were asking me why I believe these women, not woman, but women, about these accusations. And so I'm telling you my reasons, and you're just like, yeah, that's not good enough. And it's like you said, you know, there's men who have these like academic conversations about it because they'll never be in that position. They'll never be the one saying, you know, I really should have said something about this person.
That's interesting.
And after it was all said and done, and this dude ended up getting like a couple of restraining orders against him and everything, because then he started like lashing out at people and stuff. Then they were just kind of like, yeah, we kind of screwed the pooch on that one. Yeah, we told you, and you picked your side, and that's fine. But you know, don't expect me to confide in you about anything else moving forward, because you've already, yeah. And it's a weird dynamic, because you're trying to have a safe environment, but you really just don't know who's capable of what at any given moment.
Do you plan on continuing to do comedy after COVID, during COVID, or
no? Nope.
Does situations like that have anything to do with it, or
yes? Yes. I just got to a point where I feel like I know too much about too many people, and I'm trying to work on my self-esteem and my establishment of my boundaries.
So without putting anyone on blast specifically, what do you mean you know too much about too many people? Like, what is it? You know the level of predators, or just how the game works is more sinister than it seems? What is it exactly that gives you pause?
Well, I mean, it's a combination of those things, and that's the thing, is like, especially for like the gigs that I was getting that weren't in town, just like the industry, like I had really just gotten to a point where I was feeling like I am not upholding my own standards of personal courage because I'm trying to get this gig.
It's kind of insane. You were in the military as long as you were, and then you were in the comedy scene a handful of years, and you're noping out of it.
Well, I mean, it served its purpose, but especially now, it's definitely not my livelihood. And I, you know, like to eat.
What did you learn about yourself doing comedy?
Well, like I said, I didn't realize that I could appeal to audiences in that way. I on the one hand, I kind of knew that I was entertaining, but I didn't know that I could be as honest as I can be with some audiences. Now, and that's the thing, like some of the paid gigs, like they don't want you to be too political, they don't want you to be too, sexual, don't be too blah blah blah. And it's weird because it's all like on a sliding scale. So if I do a show out in rural podunk wherever, I mean literally me telling jokes about my kids being mixed can offend people. And it's just kind of like, so you're offended by the fact that my children exist. Like that's not that is not appropriate at all. But then like if I do shows locally or whatever and there's a more diverse crowd, especially the crowds that are more like LGBT friendly,
Mm-hmm.
I could say anything and it not be considered political. So it's really kind of funny because like a lot of people, yeah, so much of it depends on your audience. But I did learn that, the way that I communicate, that I can appeal to different audiences if I really wanted to. It's just, honestly, I'm so angry now that there's certain audiences that I don't want to appeal to. Like, I just don't even want to put myself in that situation anymore because it's just like, I am not up here shucking and jiving, for this hour, however long I'm talking. If you can't accept me for who I am, then why did you buy a ticket? And I mean, a lot of those shows, they didn't necessarily know who was performing, so that may be a little unfair of me to think about it that way. But at the end of the day, I know. And the other thing is, like, especially, like people want to say that PC culture is killing comedy. It's just like, no, it's just letting you know that your rape jokes and your hacky garbage penis jokes and, just talking about your genitalia, that's not funny. It's not been funny. It's just now people are holding you accountable. And I think the same thing goes with, our social justice stuff is like, it was never cool to do this stuff. Mm-hmm. It's just y'all got away with it. So now people want accountability and they're just like, well, no, we don't want to be held accountable. Well, that's like, a toddler saying, I don't want to be potty trained.
So I mean, what succinct advice would you give someone brand new considering getting into stand-up comedy in Columbus? What would be some sage wisdom that you would give them just based on all of the experience you've had?
See, you stuck me with sage wisdom. I will share the first thing that I was told by another comic when I did my first open mic, and that was record all your sets. And I think with the virtual realm doing what it's doing now, that's probably very important, because if you're not getting the feedback from an audience, like if you do an online show and like it's a Zoom show, right? Mm-hmm. The person who's producing it probably has everybody else's mics muted, so there won't be a lot of unnecessary noise coming through when the sets are being performed. But one thing that was really helpful for me was recording all of my sets. And I mean, everybody's got a voice app on their phone now, or if you're doing a Zoom, you can record it or whatnot, but listen to it after the fact, because there's something that goes on in your brain that hears it a lot differently when you're saying it than when you listen to it as an observer. But for me, I had the advantage of being in front of crowds. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if that changes it a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's always a good idea to record your sets, because that way you can kind of tell what's working, what's not, whether or not you want to shift some wording on something, or maybe just retire something. I mean,
Did you have a process for coming up with material?
I'm the worst. I'm the absolute worst. I didn't. Like something would happen, or I would think of something and it would end up being a joke. And so after I performed it 3 or 4 times, especially if it was working, it just stuck. And if I did it a few times and it didn't work, it would go by the wayside. By the time, huh?
You were testing in real time what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah, and that is exactly the way not to do it. So I was like, I feel guilty, but that was how I did it. It was so funny because like I would go do these shows and these other comics that I'd worked with before. Let's say I'm doing a half an hour, right? And this one comic told a story about me that I had completely forgotten about. But a lot of people, when they're performing, especially if they're doing a longer set, they'll not eat until they're done, right? But a lot of times, if I've driven 3-4 hours, I'm like starving by the time I get there. And so this one particular place, I was like killing this hamburger or something, right? And my buddy David was sitting there watching. And so they called me up and I was like, don't, be right back. Went and did my set. And a lot of times when people are getting ready to perform, they're like writing themselves notes and they're thinking about what they're going to say and everything. And I would just like get in front of the audience and be like, in my mind, I had like some core things that I would typically do. But the idea of me actually planning out a set like a lot of people do is not something that I hate that I got away with it, because once I started getting to do like 45-minute sets fairly often, it really would have enhanced my confidence if I were planning the sets instead of just going up and winging it. I was getting away with it, but the way I felt inside versus what I was portraying was not the same thing.
You felt a lack of preparation because you didn't.
Oh yeah. But I'm a procrastinator. Like, I've been a procrastinator. And unfortunately, I do my best work at the very last minute. So,
So, as you can see from my background, we haven't discussed it yet, but behind me is the ancestral plane.
Yes.
Where T'Challa goes to speak to his father and the ancestors of Wakanda. Recently, Chadwick Boseman has joined the ancestors. It was rough. It was rough getting that news. I was about to go to bed, 11 p.m. I was ready, and my partner tells me, "What the fuck?" I just hear her say, "What the fuck?" And I'm like, "What's going on?" And she tells me, "It's all over social media. Chadwick Boseman is dead." And it hit me hard. It hit me real hard. I've been lucky. I haven't had that many relatives or people close to me pass away, which only means later in life I'm probably going to be dealing with a whole lot of pain.
Dude.
Just the law of averages, unfortunately. If they didn't happen early, they're going to happen later.
Yeah.
But because
that's a whole nother discussion.
That's a whole nother discussion. But it was just so rough for me because honestly, me as a performer, what I envision for myself when I'm like, what is the end goal? What is my ideal self? I envision a person like him, just the power, the talent, the confidence with which he carried himself.
But he was humble.
And how humble he was. And I mean, he was so humble, he was dealing with cancer since 2016, and no one, I mean, the people close to him knew, but most people didn't know because he wasn't whining about it, he wasn't crying about it, he wasn't making it about that. He was doing his work. And man, it was such important work that he did.
I remember a picture circulating of him, I don't know, maybe a few months ago. And he was looking, was that when it was? And he was looking really gaunt, and people were just kind of like, what's going on? But that was like all that was said about it. Like nobody.
I missed that. I think he did a video on Jackie Robinson's birthday, which is normally Jackie Robinson Day for Major League Baseball. but it got canceled because Major League Baseball was canceled because of COVID. So he actually died on Jackie Robinson Day, like the makeup day that they did.
Yeah.
But on the original day, he made a video about a foundation he was donating money to that gave like protective equipment to African American communities dealing with COVID. And in that video, that's the one where people were pointing out he was really thin and frail looking. I actually missed that completely. Everything happening with COVID, I completely missed that was a thing. But in hindsight, having seen that video after he died, it looks so obvious. Like, wow, he was like deteriorating.
Well, and especially with actors, we're just like, oh, well, he's doing a role. Or,
yeah, I think that's what people said immediately. Oh, he's preparing for a role, which is insane.
Because he had been so prolific.
Though.
He had done so much before Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, look, I absolutely believe that Black Panther was on a whole nother level because it wasn't just a movie. It was literally a socioeconomic moment in time.
And he knew that.
And I believe you knew that. I believe you knew that. And I think that because if you think about it, he got his diagnosis probably around the time, because when was Panther released? Was it 17?
I think it was 2018, but he originally was in Civil War. That was like the first movie that they introduced Black Panther, and then after that, they introduced the solo movie he would have, but that was kind of like his introduction to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I'm pretty sure he did most of those movies, the Marvel movies, after 2016.
Well, and I mean, if you have ever had somebody that's dealing with cancer, like sometimes depending on what kind of cancer it is and what kind of treatments they deal with and all this kind of stuff, at first, like they may do a round of treatment or whatever, and it kind of goes into remission.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a number of things that could have happened that, like, I forget who I was, somebody was saying how they couldn't understand how he was working through all of that. And me being built the way that I am, I absolutely get it. Mm-hmm. Because working and producing this thing, especially like that project, would, it would have been the legacy for my kids. It would have been me taking my mind, being this big picture thinker, mm-hmm. kind of thing, as opposed to, I got this thing going on with me, but this needs to happen, The
perspective I got when he died, it kind of shifted from he's doing all these movies because he knows the cultural impact, and to some degree it changed to like, wow, maybe he was facing his own mortality. He's like, I got a few years left and I gotta take care of my family.
Why not both?
And why not both? But they just never considered the other one. It's almost like Breaking Bad. Have you ever watched Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
Walt feeling the need that he needs to gather as much money as possible before he dies so his family's taken care of. That's just an angle I hadn't considered with him, because which one of us was thinking he was going to die? And
right. But I mean, people get hit by buses. I'm not making light of it. I'm not making light of it.
It's true.
But, we talk about being prepared, and we talk about, I mean, there's something about having a terminal illness that people really kind of shake off everything and be like, okay, this is what's important. Because at least the people that I have known, mm-hmm. that have dealt with those kind of situations, is a lot of the frivolous BS that it's just a non-issue at that point.
Yeah.
Like once you start setting your priorities, and the one that you hadn't been thinking about for so long is survival, and now you're like actively thinking about your own survival, that a lot of other stuff just kind of, I'm not even worried about that. We'll deal with that if I survive this.
He definitely had a very strong impact on me.
Oh, absolutely.
sounds like he had a very strong impact on you. I think he had a very strong impact on society as a whole. Listening to his commencement speech at Howard, just so powerful. He had so many powerful speeches. Just when I think of him, I think of power. It's like a silent power. It just radiates out of him. It's in his eyes. It's something almost undeniable. And I want to be like that. I want to strive, even if I don't reach that. That's his effect, that he can give us something to aspire to be. And even in the characters that he played and the way he portrayed them, the grace he portrayed them with.
I think that he was probably the closest thing to a guy next door archetype for the Afro community. Like, he wasn't playing off of his looks. He wasn't this big buff dude who was just doing all this crazy stuff and just completely jacked out. He was a guy, but he could transform into all these different roles.
He was so talented.
But I think there was a degree of attainability that he lent to his roles that made it seem less fantastic. Like him as T'Challa, yeah, he was taking his punches and he was, doing what he needed to do and everything, but he was also doing it with this like quiet wisdom and there was this kind of quietness about the way he presented himself. He wasn't, big time party boy just out here talking trash and all this kind of stuff. And I gotta admit, I haven't seen too many of his movies, but it seems to me just taking like Jackie Robinson and Panther, and there was a crime drama that he was in. Oh, I can't remember the name of it, but it wasn't so much that he was soft-spoken, but he was the kind, he didn't have to yell.
Yeah.
He could command attention just by his natural speaking voice.
And they alluded, I mean, I know you're talking about him as a person, but even in Black Panther, T'Challa's character, they allude to it with the outfit. When his sister shows him the one with all the gold, the one Killmonger ends up grabbing, he's like, no, I don't like it, it's too flashy. He wanted they kind of highlighted that and I thought that was a cool moment. It kind of speaks to what you're saying. We're at about the hour mark, so we're about to get wrapped up again. Just wanted to make this tribute to Mr. Chadwick Boseman to end the episode. Great man, great actor.
Great legacy, though. He really.
He's one of those legends he played. He became a legend.
Yeah.
What a legendary life. It's so exciting to me. So I saw a video of people, and it's mostly Black people, speaking to a poster of him. It's like a poster. And they were asked to like tell the poster like the impact Black Panther had on. What stuck out to me is all the Black people in this clip were like clearly really successful, like clearly come from money, clearly high performing, and they're all gushing at this poster about the impact it had on them. And then the whole surprise was he was actually behind the curtain, and then he comes out and hugs them. But it just stood out to me like, man, look at the impact, just universal impact on people like me, not children, not people who are poor, not people who feel that they're not successful. Like, these are high performing, intelligent, and still found so much validation out of a superhero movie.
But that anecdote right there is literally the importance of representation.
Yeah,
because even
it's undeniable.
Like when you were a kid, yeah, and the Black Panther comic has been around for how long? Like, the character has been around for how long?
Older than the actual Black Panther organization by a few months. People don't know that. They think it's the other way around. They think he's based on the Black Panthers, but I think it's actually the other way around.
But that's the thing is like when we talk about representation, when we talk about moving into spaces of power, when we talk about trying to affect change, there's something just immensely empowering about seeing a minority person doing all of the things that society has said we're incapable of doing.
No,
and doing it effortlessly.
I just don't know. I don't know how anyone could see it in any other way. I've watched TV shows. So, for example, I really liked How I Met Your Mother. I was really into that show. But then at some point it hits me. I'm like, there's not one friend they have that looks like me. So
right.
I'm really into the show. I'm into the characters. I'm invested in their lives and I care about their lives. But there's just part of me that's like, would they want to be my friend?
What this got to do with me?
Be part of their circle?
Right.
So when you see, which is why I love those 90s shows where the circles did look like us, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, shows like that.
Living single, man.
I have my kids watching Sister Sister now and they love it. And it makes me think the 90s had a lot more positive representation than now, it seems like.
I don't know why that scaled big too. Now that you mention it, I agree with you on that. That it just kind of seems like, but I mean, on the one hand, now you have people, you know, depending on streaming services and like network TV isn't what it was. Even syndicated TV isn't what it was in like the 90s and early 2000s, because now kids are just watching TikTok. Look, I'm guilty of that. I shouldn't say it too loud.
TikTok and YouTube.
Where the consumption of content is so much different than it was 15 years ago.
And the creation of it too. Like, look, I'm running my own show that probably looks more legit than 99% of the public access shows in the 90s. So,
man, I look at some of these TikTok videos and they're showing you, they're doing the tutorials of how to do the effects with the, you know, disappearing and reappearing and stuff. And I'm just kind of like, that you used to need a college degree to do that.
Oh, my daughter's a whiz with the TikTok. She's a whiz at most of these things. But we're about to wrap up. Do you have any final words of wisdom? Anything you're working on? Anything you want us to know? I want you to send us off.
So I know I said that I won't be performing comedy anymore, and that is my intent as of now. But I am part of a theater production. The name of the play is Building the Wall, and we're going to be doing a live stream broadcast of it on September 20th. And it's a very tense drama. There are only 2 characters. I was actually a part of this production last year, and so we're reviving it just for one night for the live stream. I think he's gonna have an encore stream of it like the Friday after the 20th, maybe. But it's Red Herring Productions. So if you go to Red Herring Theater, Columbus, Ohio, then you can get the details about how to link in on the live stream. And it's fun because it was the first dramatic role that I had done in like 20 years. And so most people only knew me for comedy. And like one of my first lines is my race a problem for you? So people who came to see it were just like, this is not a comedy. But I'm excited to get to do that again.
September 20th, you said? What
yes.
time?
7 p.m., I believe. But like I said, if you go to the website, the details are there.
Look it up. Red Herring Theater, September 20th. You don't want to miss it. Again, thank you so much for being on here.
Thank you.
It's been a blast, and I'm hopeful that you will be a future guest.
Oh, absolutely. Look, a sister ain't got nothing but time these days.
I think a lot of us feel the same way.
Maybe we'll have that whole nother conversation about adulting and loss and dealing with that.
Let's end it with Wakanda Forever. Rest in peace, Chadwick. Love you. All right, y'all.